He's back! And he's certainly trying his best not to be back. But sometimes, of course, only a primal scream is a satisfying release, Mr. Murdoch. Alright, enough of that. So this video is going to be about my thoughts on the 2-episode premiere of Daredevil Born Again. There will be full spoilers as we go ahead and talk about this. On the lead up to Daredevil Born Again being released, I went back and rewatched all of the Netflix show, and I do have a video about that if you want to hear my retrospective rewatch thoughts on that. But after I did that, I was a little concerned. I was like, have I just highlighted to myself all of the things that are going to be different between that show and this show, and is that going to distract me from the new show? Because I've seen some of the recent MCU TV show projects, and I have found myself underwhelmed. Some of them have felt soulless. But you know, I've kept up with interviews, I've looked into things. It seems like the soulless version of this show got axed and remade. Although yes, I certainly do have a bone to pick with how they went about things in the beginning. Not from a narrative standpoint, I should say. I think killing Foggy was tragic and an interesting spin on what they're going to do with the character of Matt Murdock. But a more cynical part of me also thinks it was their way of saying, fine, we'll include Foggy and Karen, but we're going to get them out of the way quickly so we can move on to what we want to do. That's a little unfair, because I do think that them being part of a story is going to be important moving forwards. Of course, Matt is a man who lost his best friend, someone he cares for most in this world, and that has clearly affected his character going forwards. Like, it's why he stopped being Daredevil, because how he reacted to those events probably scared him. But just from like an outside of the narrative perspective, I can't help but feel bad for the fact that they had Eldon Henson going on all of these media tours and being like, look, he's part of the show, don't worry, we got him back, we're going to kill him in the first 5 minutes. A lot of people called it, a lot of people said they were worried for Foggy's safety based on what they'd seen in the trailers and stuff. They might have been referencing events which have happened in comics, which I haven't read. I have read all of like Volume 2 of Daredevil, but other than that, there's events in the comics that I'm not aware of. Foggy was not the character I was worried about, having known about some of the events in the comics. But yeah, this show is an interesting one because it's definitely within the same continuity, and it definitely feels right. That's my main takeaway here. It feels right. It feels like a successor show. But at the same time, it is a different show. Half of the cast are different, the locations are different, the sets are different. Having recently watched through Echo, I really do appreciate the continuity, because the Kingpin presented in Echo very much feels like a different Kingpin. Like, they were trying to shy away from the previous continuity. It's nothing, I'm sure, and I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure in Echo he mentions that he killed his father with a hammer when he was 12, and in the Netflix show, I'm pretty sure he was 10. But yeah, it's kind of hard to put my finger on, but there are small details which made me think like, oh, I think this is meant to be a different Kingpin. This show marries together that Kingpin with the Netflix Kingpin, and it feels like a return to form in many ways. I think there is a perfect analogy for what this show is. I think this show is a new line of comics, a new run of comics. This is Daredevil Volume 2. If anyone's ever read a line of comics all the way up to its conclusion, and then the next volume of it with a new writer, with a new vision, I think they'll understand what I'm getting at here. This feels like the Daredevil we know and love, but put into a different time and situation with writers with different ideas. It's not grating, and that's what I was worried it would be. I was also concerned we were rehashing the whole, I'm not going to be Daredevil anymore, I've got to be Daredevil because people need my help thing, because those themes were explored in Series 3. But in Series 3, those themes were primarily explored with Matt's friends treating it like an addiction, treating it like a bad thing, and talking to him a lot about he needs to try and repress that side of him. Because in this show Matt Murdock is surrounded with different people, it doesn't feel like a rehash of that plot. It feels more like Matt's trying not to be Daredevil for his own sake instead of for other people's sake. I think some of my cynicism about them just trying to get Karen and Foggy out of the way quickly, even though that's not what they were doing at all. I think some of that comes from the whole 1 year later thing. Like, having watched the Netflix show, this very much feels like the kind of thing that they could have done an entire season around Foggy's death and the fallout from the events of Foggy's death. Like, Karen mentions that Matt didn't talk to her for weeks, and then of course she stopped talking to him. And you can imagine that in those weeks, Matt had fully sunk himself into the persona of Daredevil, maybe hunting down Bullseye. I mean, maybe not with the mask because he dropped that off the roof, but you know what I mean, like, they could have done a full series around that. And the Netflix show probably would have. But this more felt like, oh, we have unfinished business that we need to address. We're going to make it part of Matt's motivations and characterization moving forwards, but we're going to get it out of the way in the first 20 minutes and move on to what we want to do, which is these characters in this situation. And again, that's not an inherently bad thing. It's not Echo episode 1, which was just all over the place of, we need to address the Hawkeye show, we want to build up this origin story, we also need to address, these 2 times in Maya's life. I didn't do a video on Echo, but I wasn't best impressed with it. It was interesting by the end, but yeah, there's my quick mini Echo review within this video. Echo's not a great show in my opinion, I'm sorry. And I was really worried that Daredevil would end up feeling like Echo. But I'm on board for this plot, with Fisk becoming mayor and everything. He does feel a little different, but I think that's because he's trying to be a little different, right? He's now a public-facing figure who is apparently, on board with the law and all that stuff. As for some of the new things this show does, it does some exciting things, like the plotline with White Tiger. It's cool to see White Tiger. It's cool to see him utilized in this fashion. We're not getting a White Tiger show with his origin story and the fact that he fights crime, because we've already got 7 of those. Instead, we're getting him as a character within Daredevil who is going to be important within a legal trial because of some shit that went down. We're going to use White Tiger as a parallel for Daredevil in how the whole vigilante thing works and how that affects his personal life and how that got him in trouble with the law and all that stuff. And I think that's a very adept way of introducing us to a new hero character, but in a way that isn't stale and done on repeat. I also like BB Urich. I don't know if she's a character from the comics that I've just not met yet, but I really appreciate that we are spending some time with the Urich family again, because Ben Urich was one of the best parts of the Netflix show, and it's really interesting to see his niece in this show kind of, does she know that Kingpin murdered her uncle? I'm guessing that she does, but she's decided to follow in his footsteps and become a journalist, and she's playing with fire much like he did. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. Again, as I'm watching this, I'm just thinking I'm so glad this is within the same continuity as the previous show, because otherwise it would have felt so soulless. Although I really hope we haven't seen the last of Karen. I hope she does make a comeback. Maybe like it's a season 2 thing or whatever, but still, she's just too good of a character to leave by the curb. I'm already sad that we lost Foggy, because Eldon Henson had some really, really good moments in especially season 1 of Daredevil when he learns out about Matt's true identity, and they haven't beaten that stuff into the ground yet, and we actually get to explore the real life ramifications of hiding a secret identity from your closest friend and that kind of thing. But Deborah Ann Wolfe is also a fantastic actor, and it would be a shame to lose her. Just because they wanted to pivot and go in another direction. At the same time, though, I'm kind of like, yeah, Karen, get out of New York, go live your San Francisco life. You'll probably be happier there. We already kind of got a monkey's paw with getting Foggy back on the show, so maybe I shouldn't wish too hard for Karen to make a return. I also wonder if that's the last we're seeing of Bullseye this season. I don't know. I guess it wouldn't make sense to bring him back. I guess that plotline's done with. Again, it does feel a little structurally weird, doesn't it? But this is, of course, the Matt Murdock show, and it's really fun to see him embrace his life as a lawyer and find success there. And, all of the stuff we were expecting with, no, he's finally, he's in a stable relationship, or he's just, beginning to become part of a stable relationship, and, he's got his own firm and everything with a partner, and they do good work and everything, and now he's being called back to action as Daredevil, and he's trying to resist it, and we see by the end of episode 2 he can't quite resist it because he has to use his skills as Daredevil to save his own life. I did notice, by the way, so I think there's some political commentary in this show. I'm sorry to break it to everyone who thought that Daredevil was never political. All fiction is inherently political in some way or another. It's the way it is, sorry fam. The obvious one is that Fisk is a metaphor for Trump, right? This obvious villain is in power. There's a certain subset of people who revere him with a cult-like fervor, and something I found really interesting was the effect this had on Matt, because he can't doom scroll, of course, because he's blind, but he can doom listen. And it's really interesting. I love the idea of witnessing him trying to live a normal life while being unable to block out people celebrating the rise of his greatest villain to power all around him. It's such a foil to his everyday normal life as Matt Murdock. Like, you know how you just can't resist, like, booting up Blue Sky or Twitter or whatever you use and, like, scrolling it, and, like, whenever there's bad news, seeing everyone's reactions to it. It's the same with Matt, except it's his super hearing. And then the other thing I noticed is that obviously this case with White Tiger revolves around a perceived cop killing and how people can be treated in incarceration and stuff like that. How mob mentality and emotional reactions supersede due process and figuring out the actual truth of the matter before acting. How people in positions of power reach their own conclusions, and yeah, that kind of thing. I noticed at the end of this episode that one of those cops was wearing like a Punisher skull tattoo, and I don't want to spend too long on this, but there has been some usage of the Punisher symbol among some people of the far right to kind of justify their beliefs. And I do wonder if this is going to be Marvel tackling that idea. Could be a very sticky subject, and I do wonder if they're brave enough to take it on. I guess we'll see as the series unfolds. Also, for a less sticky talking point, yeah, I'm not surprised that the Punisher is going to be a big part of this season, given that the showrunner for Born Again, it was also the showrunner for Punisher. I did briefly consider rewatching the Punisher in preparation for this series, but from what I remember, I don't think there was anything too monumentally ground-shifting regarding that character within his own show, so it's a good show, though. I was reading the SFX interview, and one of the things that concerned me when they were talking about Born Again was that they said a lot of a Netflix show was two characters sitting around and talking about morals, and we want to be a little bit more action-focused than that. And I was concerned that with that shift in focus that the show would lose some of its heart and some of its themes, some of the core of it, which is about, you know, the morals of being a vigilante and how it affects the people you love and the line between right and wrong and all that stuff. And while I'm definitely missing a little bit of that from this show, I think it is still there. But yeah, in terms of like, has this been Marvelized, which is a weird thing to say given that the original Netflix show was still a Marvel show, but you know what I mean. Has this been MCUified? I did notice in the first episode when Daredevil swung around on his little rope, he did a superhero landing and he struck a hero pose even though he was meant to urgently get to where the situation needed him to be, and that was some severe Rubberman CGI, good lord. I can't help but think, could you really not have spent a little bit more on that shot? Could you not have made it look less Rubberman, because that was egregious. Obviously we saw at the end of episode 2 that they are still focusing on real hand-to-hand combat action scenes and stuff. It's not all going to be CGI. And CGI isn't always inherently bad. I think the way it's used in Spider-Man is good. I mean, I've only watched each one of those movies once, but I remember enjoying them and not being taken out of the experience because of the CGI. But if you're not able to do it at a high budget and it ends up looking like Rubberman, I really hope they don't keep Rubberman Daredevil around for too many scenes in this show. We didn't need Rubberman Daredevil in the Netflix show, so why do we need him here? I know he swings around on ropes. Not ropes, I forget the name of the actual weapon, but I know he swings around in the comics. I don't know if we need him swinging around in the Marvel show. The whole point of him being the whole point of a Netflix show was to kind of ground him in reality and explore the themes of what this hero does in a real world, and I think you lose some of that when you have him swinging around New York. But yeah, just to summarize, I've kind of like voiced my doubts and concerns here, but I did have a really good time with these opening 2 episodes. I saw on IMDb, I don't know if it's changed, but last night I saw they were rated like 9.7 and 9.8 out of 10. I don't know if they were that incredible, but it was really good to be able to watch Daredevil again. It feels like I'm watching Daredevil again, which is what it should have felt like all along. I will miss some of the previous characters in the series, mostly because a lot of them are dead. Elektra, Stick, now fucking Foggy. Even the priest, I'm mostly atheist, agnostic leading atheist, but I really enjoyed them exploring the Catholic themes in the original show. It was really interesting. I hope they haven't cut that out entirely because Matt's mother is still alive, to the best of our knowledge anyway. If they've killed her off screen, I'm gonna be real mad. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought down below if you like. And I don't know if I'm gonna do a video every week. I might do. It depends how I feel. We might do proper thoughts per episode every week I react to the episode as I watch it. Or I might just do this premiere reaction and then my thoughts on the entire series as a whole. We'll see. But thank you for tuning in. I hope you liked the episode too. I did see one random article on my phone that was like, oh, it's the biggest disappointment of the year. I don't know what that was about, but anyway, we don't need to worry about that. Anyway, I'll catch you in whatever I make next.